Good morning, teacher. Good morning, classmates. Can you guess how many short stories wrote Edgar Allan Poe? Can you guess how many poems? Yes, I am going to refer to him. I'm going to say some facts that calls my attention. His short stories and just mention the number of the poems he wrote. In the slides will be more information if you want to pause the presentation and read. I think that I invite you to do it. So this guy was born in 1809 and died in 1849. A master of poetry, short stories. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but lived in and worked largely in Baltimore, Philadelphia. His mother, Elizabeth Arnold Hopkins, was an actress, and his father, David Poe, was also an actor. His father abandoned him, and his mother died of pulmonary tuberculosis a year later. He was raised by a guy called named Allan, where Edgar Allan Poe originated his last name. He studied at the University of Virginia, and at 18 years he joined the army as means of support and published a poetry collection. Mr. Poe had two siblings, William and Rosalie. By the age of 13, he had written enough poetry that he could have published in his own book. This guy first published book it was when he was only 18 and was titled Tamerlane. While working, Poe wrote book reviews and short stories, making the magazine the most popular in the South. He married Virginia Clem when she was only 13 years. He was 27 at that time. In 1837, he moved to New York. While he was in New York, he wrote his only novel titled The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. In 1844, Poe published a new story about a balloon trip across the ocean. Poe's wife Virginia died at the age of 24, and his writing career came to a halt because he was so devastated. The Edgar Allan Poe House Museum is located in Baltimore, where it is believed that Poe lived when he was 23. Let's see his short stories. The Angel of the Owl is a comedy about being wronged. The Balloon Hawks, newspaper about balloon travel. The Black Cat is a horror story about a cat. A drunk man kills his cat and it comes back to haunt him in Poe's usual style. The narrator of the story is the killer, and we see things through his eyes. Quite a horrific tale. The Cask of Amontillado is a story of revenge. The narrator in this story vows revenge upon a man named Fortunato. He takes advantage of Fortunato's ego and lures him down into the recesses of an underground vault to taste a rare, excellent, very expensive wine, a cask of Amontillado. And he also wrote a descent into the maelstrom that is man's versus nature adventure story. He also wrote Eleonora, a love story, The Facts in the Case of Mr. Valdemar, talking with a dead man. The Fall of the House of Usher, a good short story. An Old House and Its Secrets, one of the most widely read of Poe stories. The narrator receives a desperate letter from a boyhood friend requesting him that he come to see him. The friend, Mr. Roderick Usher, lives in a very old mansion out near a swamp. Once inside, the narrator finds more than he expected. A classic story of a creepy guy living in a haunted house. And he also wrote The Gold Bug, a search of pirated treasure. He wrote also Hop Frog Midget Seeks Revenge, The Imp of the Perverse, the Procrastination and Confessions, The Island of the Fae, a poetic discussion, and his famous Ligeia, a haunting supernatural tale. The narrator describes his beautiful wife Ligeia. She dies and he is heartbroken. Sometime later, he decides to move on with his life and he remarries. Strange things start to happen. The narrator thinks more and more about his first love. Ligeia appears in his mind like a real one. Besides those, he also wrote manuscripts found in a bird, Adventure at Sea, Mesmeric Revelation, which is a conversation with hypnotized dying man. And one of the famous is The Mask of the Red Death, the horror of the plague. The Red Death is a plague which has killed half of the population. Prince Prospero gathered 1,000 people from the knights and royalty. They sealed themselves off from the rest of the world in an extensive castle in an attempt to separate themselves from the horrible condition on the outside. But can they escape the Red Death? Read it. Another famous is The Murder of the Rue Morgue, a detective story. Poe invented the detective story with his tale. The main character, Auguste Dupin, a sleuth that solves crimes by deduction. Two women have been brutally murdered, and it appears that there was no way in or out of the room where the murders took place. How does Dupin figure out who killed the woman? They didn't kill each other. Beside the previous one, he also wrote Never Bet the Devil You Had, which is a comedy with a moral. The Premature Burial, about being buried alive. And another two famous, The Over Portrait, which is about a tragic love. A painter is so obsessed with painting the perfect portrait of his beautiful wife that he does nothing else until it is finished. As an artist himself, I can relate to this story in more ways than one. It is very short, only a couple of pages. And the famous Pit and the Pendulum, a torture chamber, another Poe's more popular work. It is the story of a man attempting to survive in a torture chamber during the Spanish Inquisition. One of the most deadly Inquisition in history, as you know. This is a really horror story. It's more a suspenseful thriller. If you have been sentenced to death in a torture chamber, what would you do? And what's in the pit? He also wrote The Pardon Letter, a detective story, Silence, a Fable, which is about a dream, Some words with a mummy, please a mummy speaks, and the spectacles. Another famous is the Telltale Heart story, A Murder's Guilt. The narrator of this story tells you his perfect plan to kill an old man, then take you through the process of doing it. He might get away with to expect he start hearing things. Also wrote The System of Dr. Tar and Prof. Feder inside an insane asylum, and wrote William Wilson, Identical Twins or something else. Finally, need to say that he also wrote more than 60 poems. As you probably have seen now, I presented more information just if you want to read it. Some facts about his life, have an idea about the topic of his short stories, and the number of his poems, more than 50 poems. In general, he developed themes as mental instability, death, and love. I have been in different seminars about Edgar Allan Poe, and I look at those sites. Thank you very much. This is my presentation. Bye now.